I'm Andrea Giles, and you're listening to the Heal from Infidelity podcast, episode number 195, Reclaiming Your Life After Abuse with Alysha Lee. Hello, and welcome to the Heal from Infidelity podcast, where courageous women learn not only to heal from their spouse's betrayal, but to become the boldest, truest, most decisive, and confident versions of themselves ever. If you know there's more for you than the life you're currently living, but don't quite know how to get there, you are in the right place. Stick around to learn how to create a life that will knock your own socks off. Is it possible? It is, and I'm here to show you how. I'm your host, Andrea Giles. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Heal from Infidelity. I have an amazing guest today that's going to be sharing her intense story of leaving an abusive relationship. I decided to have her on because I know that while most of you aren't dealing with the level of abuse that Alysha dealt with, it may ring true for some of you. There may be some of you that are in situations that you're not sure how to get out of, that you might not see, that you might not fully understand, because when you're in it, it can be very, very hard to see. And she's going to be sharing her story, how she kind of woke up to what was going on, and ultimately how she got out of it. I hope you enjoy listening to her, and I will catch you next week. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Heal from Infidelity. I have a wonderful guest to bring on today. I know you're going to love hearing from her, hearing her story. Her name is Alysha Lee. I knew that I needed to have her on today to share with you her own very real story of resilience, of growth, of really reclaiming her life. Alysha, can you please say hello, introduce yourself? Welcome, welcome.
Hi, Andrea. Thanks so much for having me on today. This is such an honor. Your podcast has just been such a safe space for me. I love the work that you do. So
thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, my name is Alysha, and I went through some pretty hard stuff at a pretty young age. When I was 19, I kind of conformed to religious expectations, and I married a person who I had met through church and thought he was a pretty good guy, even though everyone around me seemed to see some red flags. But when you're 19, love is pretty blind, and you choose to see what you want and kind of ignore the things that you want to pretend aren't there. And things got pretty bad pretty fast. Just for sake of time, I'll just give you the short version, but there was a ton of manipulation, isolation from my family and friends, physical abuse, I would say spiritual abuse.
Wow.
My book that I just released does a little bit more, goes into the story a little bit more, but that's just a little bit about me. And then we can talk, I guess, a little bit more about how I broke free from some of the chains and living a pretty good life now.
Perfect. Thank you. I actually told Alysha this right before we started recording, but I wanted to have her on because for some of you listeners, some of you are not necessarily in an abuse situation where it's a pattern of abuse. For some of you, it's like a one-time thing or a period of time where the infidelity occurred. And then some of you, there's more of a pattern of abuse that's been over many years. And we do need to talk about that. We do need to make sure that we understand it. And Alysha has done so much healing from her own abuse, left the relationship, has done so much work on herself to heal herself, that I'm hoping that for those of you who are listening to this episode, that you can hear maybe some familiarity in your own story and things. Well, hopefully not, right? We don't want anybody to be abused. But if you hear familiarity, if something resonates with you, I hope that you can listen to this as a way to build courage in yourself and insights into what is possible for you, and even some of the things that maybe to think about that maybe you haven't thought about, possibilities that you may not have seen for your own life. So I want to just go into the story a little bit more. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I want to ask you, Alysha, 19 years old. I know this story. I was also 19. I understand that, right? How soon did something register for you that something was very wrong? Or when did you first kind of go, wait a minute, like, I don't know. I don't know if this is normal. I don't know if this is okay. How soon did you start to pick up on it?
Yeah. For me, it was pretty quick. There were a lot of things that were promised initially from the marriage that didn't happen. Silly things like my ex told me that he was planning a honeymoon for us. And unfortunately, our honeymoon was hanging out at his mom's house because he had taken a trip a few months before we got married and spent most of his money. So he didn't have money to take us on a honeymoon, which would have been okay if it was just something that he didn't have the money for, but things just kind of kept escalating. We went off to school and I had registered for classes and I was starting school. We were still young, we were in college, and I kind of found that he was just sitting on the couch and not going to class for a week or so. And I asked him why he wasn't going to school, and come to find out, he had actually been kicked out of school and hadn't told me that. So he wasn't going to school. He didn't have a job. He was kind of trying to get a business up and running, but didn't really have any experience. And so a lot of it was just kind of hoping something would work out. At the time, we were actually living in my parents' condo that they had property where we were going to school. So he didn't really have to worry about rent or anything like that. He had an office, and most of the time he would lock himself in the office with his computer, and I wasn't really sure what was going on in there. Soon enough, he started memorizing my school schedule. And then if I wasn't home within 5 or 10 minutes after my last class ended, he would get so anxious and start calling me and freaking out. And I knew when I got home that he was just going to explode because he assumed that I was telling everyone all of his business that he didn't want anyone to know, which wasn't the case. Sometimes it just took longer to get home from class.
Let me pause you. I'm going to pause you real quick. So it wasn't out of concern.
Yeah.
Of like where you are, his mind, like, why, I hope she's okay. It was jumping to, what is she telling people?
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of paranoia. Okay.
Yeah, he was paranoid. He was worried that I was just airing his dirty laundry, and he was really concerned about his own reputation. Eventually, my parents called me because I'm still pretty young and they hadn't heard from me for a few weeks, and they just wanted to check in and see how everything was. They knew something was off because they're parents, and I kind of broke down and kind of told them a little bit that things weren't going super great, and kind of broke down a little bit. And he was secretly listening in on the conversation. And after that, took my phone and put some kind of restrictions on it so that only I could call him and only he could call me. There was no other way that I could use my phone to talk to anyone else. So that's when kind of the isolation began. And
how far into the relationship were you at this point?
Let's see. We got married in October. This was probably like January or February. So this was
so quick. It was quick. Okay.
Yeah. So I started getting pretty paranoid because he set some rules for me, and he was about 6 years older than me, and I'm still pretty young. And so I don't really have a voice, and I'm just kind of following, even though I know this isn't okay. This doesn't feel okay, but I kind of stayed silent just because it felt like survival for a little bit.
Okay. Kids? No kids?
No kids, thankfully. Yeah, that would have been super messy if there were kids. So that's one thing that I'm grateful never happened.
So tell me, okay, so your parents are not allowed to call you. You're not allowed to call your parents. How far away from your parents did you live?
Yeah, so my parents were in Colorado, which is where I'm originally from, and we were living at the time in Idaho.
Okay.
The one saving grace was my brother was actually up there too at the same college. And so it sounds so silly to say I would sneak to see my brother, but we would sometimes meet up on campus when he kind of knew my schedule too. And there was like a weekly gathering on campus, and it kind of became our spot where we would meet. And I would just kind of tell him like how I'm doing. And he kind of became the middleman. He in turn kind of told my parents, like, this is not okay. Like there's a lot of weird stuff going on, and she's paranoid, and she is isolated, and she goes to school and she comes home and that's it. And so my parents, they did own the condo, and they actually basically reached out to an attorney to get some legal advice, since it was their property, about how they could evict my husband, and basically just to get me to come home for a little bit of time and kind of get some therapy and get some healing, because the world that he created for me was completely delusional, and I was living in this delusional world. And so they basically tried to get some legal advice to see legally what they could do to get me out of the condo. And since they owned it, they showed up one day and they said, we need to talk to our daughter. There was actually a policeman that came with them because they weren't sure if he was going to get violent, because it wasn't unlikely that he wouldn't. And basically I had like 5 minutes to grab some of my stuff. My parents, they are pretty nice, and they didn't completely evict him. They let him stay, but they said, we're going to take our daughter at least for a couple months and get her some help and some clarity. And then she's going to make the decision if she actually wants to come back into this relationship.
And how far in was that? How long had you been married at this point?
At this point, it was probably, I want to say like 8 or 9 months. It wasn't even quite a year. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me, how much did you, in that short time, how much did you get tangled up in what he was saying about you?
Yeah.
Like sucked into his story, his narrative. That's question number one. Question number two is, what was it like at home? Like when you got home from school, what was it like?
Yeah, those are some great questions. Well, a lot of what I had been experiencing up until this point was emotional abuse. And I think one thing that emotional abuse doesn't do is it doesn't always scream in your face. For me, it would just whisper, and it was just a constant questioning of my intuition. Am I going crazy? Is this really as bad as it is? Or am I just like weak? Is this how marriage is supposed to be? Does everyone have problems like this? Is he actually concerned about me? But a lot of the disapproval was masked as concern. And a lot of the rules that he set for me would change without notice. There was a lot of spiritual manipulation that he made me feel guilty for wanting boundaries. And I just began to really second guess myself at every turn. I think when you live like that long enough, you forget to trust your own voice, or if you even have a voice. So really writing the memoir really helped me kind of articulate what happened. And at this point, the abuse didn't necessarily leave bruises on my skin. It would eventually, but it did mostly scar just my self-worth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there was a lot of confusion, a lot of twisting, right? Of manipulation. And the thing that's so painful to realize about emotional abuse, about manipulation, about those kinds of practices is how it's intended.
Yeah.
It's intended to mess with us. It's intended to disorient, to get us to doubt our own intuition, because it's control, right? It's intended to control. And so it makes sense that you quickly, because of what was happening, that it sounds like you quickly stopped trusting yourself.
Yeah.
That you're like, am I going crazy?
Mm-hmm.
When your parents showed up, was that a relief, or were you afraid of what would happen?
Goodness. It was a little bit of both, to be honest with you. I was relieved because I felt like I kind of had a way out if I wanted it. But also in like a very twisted way, I felt like for whatever reason, I still loved him. And there's a slight sliver that wanted to make it work. And so it was this fear that if I did return, things would just get so much worse because of what had happened and with my parents showing up and with me leaving. And I just knew that like if I ever come back, like it's going to get way worse. He's going to lock me down so much further, or there's going to be way more abuse, or he's going to use different tactics to scare me. And so it was just kind of this weird thing where I so badly wanted out of it, but then I so badly wanted it to work with him, but in a different way. Like I wanted him to be a different person, even though I can't, that's unfair to ask someone to be a different person when they've already kind of showed you their true colors.
Yeah. So you went home.
Yeah.
Tell us what happened next.
Yeah. So I go home and I'm just kind of going through the motions. Some days it was just like, can I get up and just brush my teeth? Just going through a lot. He was, I think I got a new phone at this time, and he was constantly texting me or sending me emails, just like pouring his heart out and telling me like, oh, you can't trust your family and you can't trust your friends, and no one knows our relationship like we do, and no one knows what's right for you, and I want what's best for you, and just constantly muddling everything that I was trying to decipher. My parents actually found me a trauma counselor. So I went and talked to her. She had me take an assessment, and I can't remember exactly how she scored it. I talk a little bit more about it in my book, but basically I was, as far as emotional stability, I was like way off the charts. Like she was like, we have so much work to do. I didn't even know. I remember she asked me to have a seat in her office. And because I wasn't used to making decisions for myself, I just looked at her and I said, which one? And she looked at me and said, well, anyone you'd like. It's your choice. It doesn't matter. And that was kind of a breaking point that like, wow, I don't really know how to make decisions. I'm used to people making decisions for me. So we worked through a lot of that. Then I actually was still really struggling with everything that was going on. And I felt like everyone was in my business. I felt like everyone knew what was going on because I was back in my hometown. And I've later learned that really no one cares what's like, people aren't actually in your business as much as you think they are. But it was just hard for me to go to the store and just see people I knew from church or from school or whatever. And I just felt like everyone was shaming me or judging me and like, you're so young, like you should have known this was never going to work. And anyway, I just had these constant voices in my head. And finally, I had a good friend at the time, one of my best friends from high school. Her parents had just moved to DC, and they actually kind of suggested that I come stay with them for a few months and just kind of go somewhere new and get some clarity and just be able to kind of get the healing that I need without what I thought was just a bunch of voices in my head kind of telling me what to do.
Wow. So you went?
Yeah. So I went for a few months. Yeah.
So does this mean when your parents showed up, did you drop out of school? Did you have to drop out to go home?
Yeah. Okay. So I actually dropped out of school, and then I ended up reapplying to a different college. It was in Hawaii, actually. And my ex was from California, and he kind of had like a bit of a surfer vibe. He really liked surfing and he liked the beach. And when he found out that I got accepted to a college in Hawaii, he freaked out. And I thought that he was freaking out because I was going there and he knew it was over. But then he said things like, why would you go to Hawaii? That's not even your vibe. It's more my vibe. And so it started feeling like, okay, he actually doesn't care as much that I'm going, but he's just more jealous, I guess is the word, that he's not going instead.
Or maybe threatened by it somehow too, perhaps.
Yeah, probably. That's probably a better word, threatened.
So all this time you were still in contact with him some, and he was still trying to get you to come back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
So
I
how did, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I did something pretty stupid after that, after like months of healing in DC. He was sending me, like I said, pages and pages of what he thought were love notes and you deserve to be with me and we need to start our life again. And I've stopped drinking. He was drinking pretty heavily and I've been going to counseling. We tried to go to counseling and he just like thought it was the dumbest thing in the world. And so he refused to go, but he was started telling me all these things like I've stopped drinking, I'm going to counseling. I kind of knew it wasn't true, but there was a part of me I think that wanted to believe that it was true. And I was scheduled to leave in a month or so to go to Hawaii and to start my new life there. And I had been in touch with some people over there and they said, yeah, you can come here. And I kind of told them my situation that I was kind of separated and they were like, okay, that's fine. As long as your spouse doesn't like come here, you can live in just like housing with normal girls and it'll be fine until we kind of work everything out. Cause I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. I just feel like I need to try something new. And I felt like the Lord was calling me there. So I was leaving DC and I was going to go back to Colorado for just, I think it was at this time, it was close to Christmas. So I was going to go back just for Christmas and then head out to Hawaii right after that. And I had a moment of weakness and I told my ex when my flight was landing in Denver.
Mm.
And he drove all the way from, where was he at the time? I think he was living in Utah at the time. He drove from Utah all the way to Denver. And he kind of took a page, I guess, out of my parents' book, and he brought a officer with him to the airport
Mm.
and showed up when I was there and basically was like, this is my wife. And the officer looked at me and said, is everything okay here? And I didn't really know how to respond. And so I said, yes, it's good. And then, kind of a long story short, he took me across state borders without my consent. And that's when it got pretty messy. He wasn't going to give up. He saw me getting ready to start my life over, and I had some stuff going for me. And yeah, it was just power and manipulation and just not wanting me to have some of those things.
Oh, wow. Wow. And you likely didn't have a way to communicate, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep. That's the first thing he did
Yeah.
was he took my phone again. Well, he had me call like a mutual friend so that like I think he knew that if I didn't show up, that my parents would probably like call the police or something. And so he had me call a mutual friend and he told me, this is what you're going to say. You're going to tell him you made a mistake, blah, 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 blah. And you're going back with me. And again, scared, nervous, paranoid. I did exactly what he said and drove off. We went back to Utah where his mom was living. And yeah, I didn't have any access to the outside world for a solid month. No one knew where I was. My family, my friends.
Wow.
I didn't have like, he had a computer, but it was password locked. And so I couldn't get on to like shoot an email or Facebook message anyone. I obviously didn't have my phone. So I was just kind of living in this hellhole for a solid month, thinking like, okay, this is my life. Somehow I guess I deserve this in whatever twisted way. I guess this will be my life and I should just get used to it.
Oh, what happened at that month point?
Yeah. So after that, he ended up having to take a trip and he didn't want to take me with him because he actually had to go back to Colorado and he knew that I was too much of a flight risk. So he called one of his brother's girlfriends. Brother was dating at the time and asked if she would, I guess, for lack of better terms, babysit me while he took this trip. And I basically kind of played along for a little bit. And then I told her I had been working through some therapy while I was in DC, and we had talked a lot about courage and fear with my therapist and how they are different, and that courage makes you act on the things that you're scared of. And so I just had this moment of courage where I was going to tell her that this wasn't going to be my life and that I was going to leave. And I was a little bit nervous how she was going to respond. And I knew she was probably going to tell her brother, who was going to tell my ex, and the whole thing would get messy. But I was like, I can't live like this. This is absolute insanity. And so I told her, basically, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to stay here. I didn't even want to be here. I'm against here on my will. At this point in time, I was supposed to be in Hawaii, and I had to basically defer because I missed my semester. And I thankfully was able to hack, I guess, for lack of a better term, into my ex's computer. After trying a couple different passwords, I was able to kind of figure out what the password was and send one of my friends a message who happened to have a relative that I knew lived nearby. And from that point on, I was able to kind of get out through them, and they were able to help me get out. My parents bought me a plane ticket direct, the first flight they could find back to Colorado Springs. Then I kind of started over. And from there, I went back to therapy. There was a serious court proceeding because my ex had abducted me. When you take someone across state borders without their consent, it's an abduction. And so we went through some serious court proceedings. We got a restraining order. I was worse off than I had been when I left.
Yeah.
So we had a lot more work to do with therapy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So at this point, that's a lot of life in a short amount of time. Tell me about your healing process and what that looked like. And you had mentioned earlier that you wrote a book about your experience, and what that looked like for you, which later on we'll share more about that and how people can find it. But how did you start to really put this behind you and challenge some of the stories that you had made it mean about you and all of that? How did you begin that process once you were really out?
Yeah, a lot of it was therapy. Working with my therapist really kind of opened my eyes to what is normal and what's not. And I think growing up, I mean, I always believed that if I prayed enough, or if I submitted more, if I was obeying perfectly, that God would reward me with being happy. And I feel like that belief was reinforced just when I was in the midst of my abuse with my ex, and that I felt like I would be praised if I was the quote good wife, but I was really just suffering in silence. And I started to realize that performing wasn't the same as being faithful, that real faith and real healing invited me to bring my brokenness to God and to not pretend that he wasn't there. So I kind of had to relearn this idea of like faith and healing, and just realizing that I can bring my brokenness to save people, whether that's through God or whether that's through my therapist, that I can bring that brokenness to them. And I think so much of what I carried was shame and was guilt, that if I had done things differently, that things would have worked out. And a lot of it was, oh, it's all my fault, and I broke trust, or I did this, or I did that. And then just fighting through some of those moments of weakness and realizing like, there's really no excuse. There's never an excuse for someone to abuse you, whether it's emotional, spiritual, physical.
Yeah.
That there's nothing that you could do to deserve that. So once I've rewired my brain that like this wasn't my fault, and finding just a safe space to talk about it, I think that's when the healing really happened.
I appreciate you saying that. I have listeners from all different faiths, all over the world. And something that I say a lot, like in my calls with people, is that for some people, it's God that they're kind of confiding in and saying, okay, here I am in all my glory, here, all the
Mhm.
things, and really being able to be open. Sometimes it's a person, a trusted person, but what I'm hearing is instead of being in that shame place, you kind of broke out of it by talking,
Yeah,
right? You
100%.
broke out of that shame cycle by talking, by sharing, and by saying, wait a minute, maybe there's more to this, which probably took a lot of courage,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. So much courage. I
Yeah.
mean, just kind of the expectation that like I'm so young still. I think I'm 20 or 21 at the time, and I've
Hmm.
been through all these horrible things. And most kids my age are just out going to college and living their life and dating and having fun. And I had so many scars and so much life that I had already been through that I did want to just kind of hide it and sweep it under the rug and pretend that I was like all my other peers and just out having a good time. But once I did find that safe place to talk about it, that's when I was able to kind of break free a little bit from those chains that had kept me down for so long.
Hmm. Yeah. Powerful, powerful. Tell me, how did you, from there, tell me what your life has been since?
Yeah, well, it was the healing process was slow, really, really slow. I really didn't want to talk about it with anyone outside of my safe space, which really just included my counselor and some of my close friends who knew me and kind of were living through the midst of the whole thing with me. It wasn't really something that I wanted to just talk about with random people that I met. I still felt like it carried a bit of a stigma. And how do you open up with something like that when you're 21 years old?
Yeah.
So the rest of my life, kind of the healing process was slow. I feel like there's still parts of me that are still working through some of the stuff that happened. Even though I feel like I'm healed, but there's still just questions that sometimes will pop in my mind, like, why did this happen? And is
Hmm.
there anything that in hindsight that I could have done differently? And which isn't really useful, but I'm human, and
You're
I think
human.
sometimes
Yeah.
it does pop up.
Yep. Yep.
But I did eventually get my degree. I got my undergrad and I ended up getting a graduate degree.
Wow.
I right now I am married and I have three little girls.
Hmm.
And yeah, I'm with
Awesome.
my husband. We've been married for 11 years now.
Wow.
So
Did you go to
um,
Hawaii? Did you end up going to Hawaii at all?
I did.
You
Yeah. Yes. I
did.
went to
Oh,
Hawaii and I graduated from Hawaii. And there's definitely a whole story there and a whole another life that happened there that really did help in the healing process. But I did end up there. And yeah, I went on and got some really good internships. Actually, ended up going back to DC and intern with the Treasury. Just
wow.
kind of like a full circle
That's amazing.
moment. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So what led you to decide to write your book?
Yeah. Well, I started writing my book in 2019, honestly, as just another form of therapy and just as another way to kind of articulate what had happened. Because sometimes you know what happened, but you don't always know why it happened. And I think that was kind of my goal for writing was like, I wonder if I can kind of articulate some of the things that happen and some of my thoughts and feelings behind it. Because I spent so much time talking about it in therapy, but I also just wanted to see if I could articulate it in my own words. So I started writing it in 2019, and then COVID hit in 2020, and it kind of became, I guess, more or less a passion project. And I like to call it not a COVID project because I started before COVID. And it was just a form of therapy. And there's so many parts of the story that I wanted to completely forget about. But at the same time, those parts, even the messy ones, were really important to the story and to the healing process. So I just kept writing and writing. And then I realized that I really loved it. And I really loved how it was making me feel and some of the sense of freedom it was giving me. And I started just briefly sharing my story with people close to me. And I started realizing that there's a lot of people that would tell me, oh, my mom went through something similar. my sister's going through something like this. And I realized that I really did want to share my story just to help those people, those moms, those sisters realize that they aren't alone and that they can get through this.
Mm, amazing, amazing, amazing. And now, where has this led for you as far as this thing that you intended at first to do for your own healing? What has it evolved to now for you?
Yeah, there are so many people that have read the book and they're like, oh my gosh, like I just want to hug you right now. I want to cry with you right
Yeah.
now. And that's so great and that's so beautiful. And I love that people are coming to me and they're resonating with the book, but really I wrote it for those people that are struggling,
Yeah. That are in it.
that
Yep.
are in it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Hmm.
my goal would be instead of like, if you know someone is going through a situation where there is abuse, instead of just throwing my book in their face, which is great. And I love that, but they have their own story, that
Mm.
mom, that sister, whoever is going through it. So instead of just inviting them to read my story, I would love it if those people sat with their mom or their sister, whoever, and asked them for their story.
Wow. Wow. That's so powerful. That's so powerful. I want to know more about, I'm curious in your like the really, really acute, really intense times where you had some tough decisions to make. Were there people there for you that were sharing their stories that helped give you courage?
Um, I hadn't known anyone at the time that had gone through anything like I had.
Hmm. Which is
So
tough. Like that probably made you feel even more isolated, huh?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
hard.
It is isolating. And I think a lot of times people, when you go through something like this, you don't know what to say to someone who's been through something like this and you don't know how to help them. And so it was isolating. I feel like there were people that, stopped calling or stopped inviting. And there were just subtle times where it hurt when I needed that community. I feel like there's just a lot of pressure to kind of protect the institution, whether it's church or just school or whatever, rather than protecting the individual. But I did find some beauty on the other side. I found some real community that there were people that were accepting of who I was and didn't need me to be perfect, and who, even though they hadn't been through a situation like this, they still held that space for grief and truth and growth. And so it wasn't easy to like maybe lose some of those people that I thought were going to be there during the time that weren't, but I feel like I did gain so much more of a circle of people that did show up and that who I fully did know and that they still fully loved me despite some of the things that I'd been through.
Mm. Wow. So powerful. Let me ask you if you could give the listeners a message, anything you want to say to them. If there are people listening where this hits a little too close to home, where they have some understanding of what you're sharing, what would you say to them?
Yeah, 100%. I would tell them that you're not alone, that I know firsthand what it feels like to be unseen and unheard and just uncertain and inside your head. But you do have permission to choose yourself. You have permission to heal, even if no one understands. And there is life beyond just mere survival. And I would tell those listeners that they can write their own story. And I promise it won't be easy at the time. And there's some days where it seems more comfortable just to go back to where you started just because it's familiar. But I promise that it will be beautiful on the other side.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I want to reiterate one more time what you said about the shame that you felt, the blame that you put at your feet, that it must be me. I must be, deficient in some way. And that when you kind of started becoming emboldened and recognizing, wait a minute, no, this is not okay. And then you started speaking. I hear from people often who they might have shared some of their story here or there, but that there are some that haven't told a soul, they just feel so much shame. And what kind of freedom did you find in finally telling the truth of what was going on for you?
Yeah, there's so much freedom. I mean, it's like that analogy that they say that it's like a weight lifted off. I mean, it really did feel like that. And I did find, even though I was nervous to share my story with a lot of people because I felt like there would be judgment, I felt like most people, or at least the ones that mattered and the ones that were going to stick around, didn't really care. I mean, they cared, like I'm so sorry you went through that and that's horrible and
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. But they were like, that doesn't define you. Your
Yep.
past doesn't define you and the things that you went through. That's horrible. And I'm so sorry, but I
Yep.
want to get to know who you are now
I love
and
it. Yep.
the person that you became because of it.
Yep. How often we can almost see ourselves with like this permanent black mark on us of somebody who's been abused or in my community cheated on, or even I have people in the community who maybe have been abusers and are really trying, like really working hard to overcome that, or have cheated. And we can slap these labels on us that keep us shackled, right? Keep us locked up. And when we can start talking and start sharing, in Brene Brown's work around shame, she says that shame thrives in secrecy.
Mm.
And when we start talking about it, shame can't hang out, it can't stay. And so, talking, sharing, hearing other people's stories, you now know, I'm sure, that your story sadly is not unique. It is unique, right? We don't want to hear these stories a lot. But do you know what I mean by that? Like, that there are way too many people, so many people that can share the same story. And I'm so grateful that you had the gumption and the courage and the support, that you had the support to get out. There are some who don't have that support and who are kind of doing this alone. And just hearing that there's a way out for you too, listeners who might feel stuck or trapped, there's a way out for you too. So before we go, would you please share how people can learn more from you? Where can they find your book, learn more about you, your story? How can they learn more? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, my book, Everything I Might Have Missed, you can find it wherever books are sold, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. And if you want to know more about my just kind of journey with writing and where I'm at Instagram at Roses and Reading.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So listeners will have that all linked up. Go grab her book, go follow on Instagram. There's so much strength and courage here and wisdom that has been hard won, right? So wonderful to have you. Thank you so much. Anything else you'd like to say before we go?
No, this has been so wonderful, Andrea. Thank you so much for holding space for me and my story. And thank you again for all the work that you do.
Thank you. And thank you. Thank you so much for being here and courageously sharing your story. Thank you for listening to the Heal from Infidelity podcast. If you would like to be kept in the know about upcoming free classes, new podcast episodes, and other ways of working with me, go subscribe to my weekly email. You can subscribe at AndreaGiles.com/lies-about-infidelity/. Again, it's AndreaGiles.com/lies-about-infidelity/. I will see you next time.